My name is Amy. I'm 30 years old. I work from home as an illustrator and a webcomic artist. My son Ethan is just 5 years old. He's a lively boy who goes to preschool. My husband, Robert, has a busy job, so he rarely gets home early, leaving most of the housework and childcare to me. Despite the challenges of balancing work and childcare at home, I have always found joy in it. Ethan is adorable, and Robert does most of the housework and childcare on his days off. I was truly grateful for my family and felt fulfilled each day. However, my happiness was abruptly shattered one day. It was when Robert's father, my father-in-law, suddenly passed away. He was only 60 years old. Though it seemed too early for him to pass away, he suddenly collapsed and died. Robert, who lost his father without any warning, was deeply depressed, and it was heartbreaking to see my mother-in-law sobbing at the funeral. During Robert's bereavement leave, my mother-in-law stayed with us. I accepted it, thinking she must be lonely, but I was wrong. After his bereavement leave, Robert went back to his regular work routine. My mother-in-law, who had not liked me since we got married, had always treated me differently, even to the point of excluding me when serving coffee or making fun of the fact that I was raised by a single parent when Robert wasn't around. I thought once Robert started working again, she would return to her own home, but she didn't. She continued to stay in our home, bringing in her belongings in large suitcases a few days later. "Are you planning to live here, mother-in-law?" "What a cold-hearted daughter-in-law you are. I'm lonely because my husband suddenly died. You're suggesting that I live alone at home? That's ridiculous." I had asked her if she planned to stay with us, but I was shocked by her arrogant attitude and couldn't say anything in return. It's true that my mother-in-law is feeling lonely, and she is Robert's important mother, so I couldn't kick her out. And she kept bringing more and more of her belongings, eventually establishing her own nest in our living room. I work from home, so I ended up spending more time with my unemployed mother-in-law than anyone else in the family. Those days were nothing but torture. "You're always at home doodling away. Robert is out there working hard. I feel sorry for Ethan. He has been put in daycare from such a young age just for your hobby. When I was young, I took care of Robert while doing housework." My mother-in-law, who had never worked after getting married at a young age, had always been against the idea of daycare. She regarded my work as a mere hobby and started making a fuss about how pitiful Ethan was for being put in daycare. In addition, after my mother-in-law started living with us, my household chores increased significantly. Because my mother-in-law would say things like, "You won't even serve lunch to your hungry mother-in-law. What a mean daughter-in-law you are." I had to start preparing lunch as well. Despite never doing any cleaning herself, she constantly complained, "If we live in such a dirty environment, both Robert and Ethan will get sick." She kept nagging me to clean every nook and cranny while I was working, which took up more of my time. No matter how much housework piles up, work deadlines do not wait. If I'm working late into the night, my mother-in-law would say, "Poor Ethan, he doesn't even have his mom to play with him," while she simply watches TV. I've often thought about discussing the issues with Robert, but in his presence, my mother-in-law puts on a gentle facade. Besides, Robert is currently immersed in a significant work project. Not wanting him to feel stressed at home as well, I decided to endure the situation. With my passivity contributing to the problem, my mother-in-law grew increasingly overbearing. She refused to eat the lunches I prepared, complaining, "This is awful. You're trying to kill me with this overly seasoned food." She even started demanding money for dining out, often asking for more than $250. I questioned whether she really needed that much even just for dining out. However, she angrily retorted, "Are you telling me not to have fun? I want to go to the casino. Are you saying a poor widow like me shouldn't enjoy the casino? You're the worst daughter-in-law ever." Left with no other choice, I reluctantly gave her the money. Her demands for housework and money escalated day by day. Between work, housekeeping, parenting, and being my mother-in-law's punching bag, I felt at my wit's end. One day, on our way home from daycare, Ethan asked me a heart-rending question. "Mom, am I a poor child?" "What? Why would you think that?" "Grandma said so. She said you're always having fun and that you probably don't like me." Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he spoke those words. It was at that moment that I realized my mistakes. The feeling was akin to a rude awakening, and I resolved that I couldn't continue living this way. I was wrong to believe that I alone should bear this burden. My mother-in-law had gone so far as to convince Ethan that children who attend daycare are pitiful and that his mom is always just having fun drawing. I decided to put an end to this lifestyle. A few days later, I announced to my mother-in-law, who was sprawled out in the living room watching TV as usual, "Mother-in-law, Ethan and I are going on a week-long overseas trip." "An overseas trip?" She jolted upright, eyes sparkling at me. That sounds fantastic! When are we leaving? I better start packing. There's no need for you to pack, mother-in-law. As I said, only Ethan and I are going. You're saying you won't take me along? Leaving Robert behind as well is unbelievable. Indeed, both you and Robert are staying behind. Thank you for understanding. While my mother-in-law continued to grumble, I remained firm in my decision to end my life with her. A few days later, as planned, Ethan and I departed for our overseas trip. Ethan was thrilled to be on a plane for the first time. With my recent busy schedule between work and chores, I hadn't had the chance to spoil Ethan, so I took this opportunity to spoil him to the fullest. In the midst of our enjoyable overseas trip, I received a call from my mother-in-law. It was unpleasant, ruining the joyful mood, but I answered anyway. With a malicious tone, she said, "Sorry to bother your vacation, but Robert and I have moved out. There's no home for you freeloaders now. You have no place to return, so stay overseas as long as you like." Is that so? Thank you for letting us know. She seemed surprised by my indifferent response, but I wasn't surprised at all. Rather, I was thankful to her for letting me know everything was going according to plan. After our enjoyable days overseas, Ethan and I returned home to our new house. At our new home, Robert was waiting for us with a smile. "Welcome back. Did you and Ethan enjoy your overseas trip, Amy?" "Yes, we had a great time. Thank you for the wonderful trip, Robert." "Well, it's the least I could do after all the trouble." As we were joyfully reuniting, my cell phone buzzed. It was a call from my mother-in-law. With a sense of excitement, I answered the call. "Yes, what can I do for you, mother-in-law?" "You! Do you know where Robert has gone?" With a fierce tone, my mother-in-law started to explain the situation without giving me a chance to respond. She started living in the house that she had found with Robert. However, Robert had not returned home even once. Worried, she had called Robert's office only to be informed that Robert had quit a few days earlier. This drove her into a panic. Even when she tried to call Robert, she couldn't reach him. She was about to report him missing to the police. But, just to be sure, the police called Robert. To her dismay, they managed to reach him. Not only that, but when they offered to relay a call to her, Robert declined. This led to her causing a scene at the police station, earning herself a stern warning and a red-faced embarrassment. "You've done something to Robert, haven't you? Where is he?" "Robert is here at home. He's playing happily with Ethan, so there's no need to worry." "What are you saying? Robert was supposed to live with me. I was going to make him divorce you and take custody of Ethan." "That was something you unilaterally told Robert, wasn't it?" My mother-in-law was furious. However, I had discussed the situation with Robert before our overseas trip. I told him about the issues I was facing living with his mother and the negative effects it was having on Ethan. Robert apologized, saying he felt terrible about his mother's behavior. I realized for the first time during our conversation that Robert had also been struggling living with his mother. Each time they were alone, she would badmouth me, saying things like, "Amy is constantly verbally abusive. She won't even let me eat," and "You should divorce that woman as soon as possible." He was fed up with her baseless complaints. Although Robert believed in me and countered his mother's accusations, his objections only resulted in her screaming at him, leaving him feeling confused and unsure of what to do. So we executed a plan to isolate my mother-in-law. The plan was Robert's idea. He gifted Ethan and me the overseas trip and even rented a new house for us. When we returned from the trip, our things would be waiting in our new home. Since our old house was set to be vacated, Robert suggested to his mother that they should find a new house. Misunderstanding his intentions, she happily believed that Robert intended to divorce me and live with her in the new home. In her rush to ensure that I had no place to return to, she quickly settled on a house and completed the move. Robert, without informing his mother, had our family's and Ethan's belongings moved to our new home, while his mother's belongings were sent to her new place. Robert had avoided any contact with his mother, which is why she couldn't reach him. When she called his office, she was told that he had quit because, coincidentally, Robert was headhunted by a better company and decided to change jobs. In other words, during the week when Ethan and I were traveling abroad, Robert, Ethan, and I had moved into a house where we three would live together. At the same time, my mother-in-law had moved into a house where she would live alone. I imagine it was hard for you, mother-in-law, to see the face of an incompetent daughter-in-law every day. Robert and I thought it would be wise for both of us to avoid seeing each other from now on, and so we decided to handle it this way. "You are such a terrible daughter-in-law." When I explained the situation, my mother-in-law yelled at me over the phone. Robert, sighing at the voice of his mother leaking out, came up to me, subtly took over the phone, but she kept insulting me without noticing. "All you do is draw doodles like a child and don't work. Robert doesn't need a wife like you. He must have found you annoying. It would have been better if Ethan wasn't born as your son. Ethan and Robert are both really pitiful.
Mom, so you always used to shout at Amy like that, huh?
When Robert said in a quiet voice, his mother's angry voice abruptly stopped.
Mom, I love Amy and I have no intention of divorcing her. I know you must feel lonely since Dad passed away suddenly, but it's not right to bully Amy. I regret behaving in a way that deceived you, but it was the only way given that you refused to listen to anything we say.
You're being deceived, Robert.
I'm not being deceived. Amy is the best wife for me and the best mother for Ethan. I'm sorry, but I want to keep my distance from you. I can't care for a mother who says terrible things about important people.
Robert, wait, please, Robert. Ignoring his mother's crying voice, Robert ended the call.
I'm sorry for making you suffer until now. The current job doesn't require much overtime, so I can do more housework and childcare than before. Let's live happily from now on, just the three of us.
Yes, thank you, Robert. Thus, our family decided to cut ties with the mother-in-law. Later, I heard from a relative that my mother-in-law had been living for a while by dipping into her husband's inheritance. However, she couldn't stop going to the casino and for the first time in her life had to work. With no work experience, my mother-in-law, now 55, was swallowed up by the rough waves of society, leading to hard times. When Robert found out about his mother's situation, he felt sorry for her and reached out once. However, my proud mother-in-law dismissed his help, saying, "You're no longer my son. You've been tainted by that devilish daughter-in-law." Robert was dumbfounded by his mother's attitude and said with a tired face that he would no longer contact her. As for me, I turned the days of harassment by my mother-in-law into a comic essay and it became a huge hit. I got a call from a publisher and I was able to publish the comic essay book I've always wanted. I guess I should be grateful to my mother-in-law who gave me all kinds of trouble. During the hellish days after my mother-in-law came into our house, I didn't know what to do, but I fell in love with Robert again for saving me from those days. Now, I am serializing a comic essay depicting my warm family life on the web, and it is also popular. I look forward to continuing to spend happy days just like this with Robert and Ethan.